Have you ever heard of shadow work? It sounds dark. It sounds mysterious. But the truth is that shadow work is just helping us to integrate what we know of ourselves in our conscious mind together with what is hidden from us in our subconscious mind. But before we get there, I want to talk about how our shadow develops. Okay, and this is a term by Carl Jung, who developed this term when he was trying to answer the question, why do good people sometimes do bad things? And he came up with the fact that we all have a shadow self. We all have parts of ourselves that are out of our conscious awareness. We begin having a shadow self at a very young age. You see, we're born, as children, we're born whole, complete, divine individuals. When we're born and when we're very young, there are no judgments attached to any of our feelings. We just feel. We just are. We're just being. But somewhere along the line, things that we do become rejected by our primary caregivers. This happens in any family dynamics, whether you have toxic parents or not. Where you live in society also has a play in what is acceptable behavior and what is not. What are acceptable emotions or expressions of emotions and what is not. And if you were raised with toxic parents, not only are the normal negative emotions or what people label as negative emotions or feelings or actions in your shadow self, but there are also a lot of positive, unique, and beautiful qualities and emotions, actions that are hidden in your shadow self as well. So how does it come about? How does it happen? As children, we are our unique self. There's no pretend in a child. We show up as our unique self. And then parts of ourselves are rejected. And when we see that our caregiver, who we are dependent on for our very life, they are rejecting parts of ourselves, as a child, we think that part must go. I need these caregivers for my survival. So therefore, that piece of me that they are rejecting must go. It's a form of double abandonment. The caregiver rejects that piece of the child, and then the child rejects that piece of themselves as well. That's how the shadow self develops. So for example, I'm going to introduce you to some of the qualities that are in my shadow self, or that have been in my shadow self. And maybe this will help you to understand it a little bit more. In my shadow self, I had for a really long time happiness. You're probably thinking, what do you mean happiness? That's a good quality. That should be in your conscious awareness. Why would you abandon happiness? Well, if you've been in a toxic relationship with somebody that hated happiness, that caused you to feel as if you were doing something wrong every time you were happy, if you were met with anger every time you felt good and you were happy, you learned that happiness was something that you should not have. It was bad, therefore it was placed outside of your conscious awareness and it was put in your subconscious mind or in your shadow self. And the thing is, you don't verbally say in your mind, I can't be happy, I can't be happy. You don't actually say it. The thought may not be as articulated, as obvious as that. But what happens is you begin on a subconscious level being conditioned. Whenever I'm happy, I'm met with anger. So you tone down your happiness a little bit and you see that the anger is not quite so bad. So you tone it down a little bit more, and a little bit more until you no longer have that happiness, and that the person that's toxic in your life is a little bit more manageable, less scary to a child, less scary to an adult in a toxic relationship as well. Happiness is no longer a part of the emotions that are in your conscious awareness. You no longer feel that happiness. The crazy thing is, even after you leave that toxic relationship, it's the same. Happiness doesn't just bounce back into you, at least not until you do shadow work, which we'll talk about later. Do you want to see something else that was in my shadow self? Okay. This is my self-esteem, my view of myself. At one point in my life, I had a healthy view of myself, As a child, when I felt good about myself, something bad always happened, or the opinions that I had of myself, I was made to feel as if they were wrong. It wasn't true. Anytime I saw something good in myself, somehow my perception was made to feel as if there was something wrong with me. It was a lie. So I lost trust in myself, in my own ability to evaluate myself. And what I thought were my good qualities, I put in my shadow self. I was able to have self-esteem, but only when somebody else validated my worth. Somebody else gave it to me. They saw value in me, therefore I felt those moments of feeling valuable. But if they took it away, so did that feeling of feeling valuable, because it was external. And my real self-esteem was hidden in my shadow self. A really common emotion that gets stuck in a person's shadow self is anger. Anger is deemed as this bad quality. You are bad if you're angry. You're bad if you're upset. You hurt people. People don't like it if you're angry. Those are just some beliefs that children are taught. There's something wrong with them. If their parent is emotionally abusive and the child calls them out on it, they're bad that they say something. As an adult, you are a bad person if you talk about your relationship in an effort to get help from others. You're bad if you're upset. That's disrespecting the family. A lot of toxic people will make their victims feel. That's disrespecting the family. That's bad. A good person would understand everything and handle this in a way that doesn't disrupt anybody but themselves. So righteous anger, righteous validation of your feelings gets shoved into the shadow self. If this takes place from childhood, as an adult, feeling your anger is really, really hard. On a conscious level, you might realize, I should be angry. I am angry. But somebody needs to put like a defibrillator onto your heart and jumpstart it, because you can't feel that anger. And that's because rather than being whole with your shadow self is over there off to the side. Feeling all the emotions that were abandoned to you or rejected by people that were important to you in your life. And without realizing it, you learned to reject those emotions as well. Something else in my shadow self, and there's a lot. I don't know if I can show you all that's in my shadow self today, but I'm going to show you a lot. Something else that was part of my shadow self was feeling enough. Yep. Feeling good enough to take care of myself, good enough to reach out for good things, positive things, good enough to strive for amazing things, feeling good enough. Somehow, whenever I felt good enough, I was knocked down. If 9 out of 10 things I did were good, and that helped me to feel good enough in my eyes, the important people in my life would focus on that one thing that wasn't, that I didn't do right, that I didn't do enough, and that foreshadowed everything else. Feeling good enough hurt because caregivers and people in my life that should have mirrored that back didn't. And it hurt to feel good enough and be the only one thinking that. Therefore, it was shoved into my shadow self. Once again, I could feel good enough if somebody else, somebody outside of me, gave me a compliment, said something to me, noticed me, cared about me, gave me attention. Then all of a sudden, I felt good enough. But once again, the second that they changed or left my life for whatever reason, maybe it was a temporary relationship, maybe it was a friendship that came to an end because somebody moved, maybe they just completely changed themselves, all of a sudden, it was gone. And because I wasn't getting it from them and that good enough was hidden in my shadow self, I once again didn't feel it. When you are fragmented within, whether they are positive qualities or what people deem negative qualities, you never feel whole. You always feel like there's something missing inside of you. And there's a danger to having that hole, That danger is that you become bait for toxic people, because a toxic person is an expert manipulator, and expert manipulators have the ability to know what we need, what will make us feel good, what we're lacking, and then they present it to us as if it's real, but it's just a mirage. And if you don't understand that, please check out my video entitled Healing Pathological Loneliness and Codependency, the biggest mistake we make. Take a look at why that's a danger. Now, there's so much more that's in my shadow self, and I'll share some of that in my next video, but I would love to know what's in your shadow self. Have you ever taken the time to think about the pieces of yourself that were rejected from childhood, that were denied value? Did you ever notice that as an adult, you began to reject those same qualities in yourself? What are they? Take a look, shine the light in your shadow self. What do you see? Let me know in the description box below, and then make sure to like and subscribe to my channel, hit that bell icon, because in my next video, I want to do more shadow work, because that's where the real healing begins.